Ren is an ugly, pathetic brain-rot loser who has zero ambitions in life until he gets summoned by a bored demon lolly. Even though he doesn't understand a word she says, he throws his life away just to see that Giyat every day. It all started. One day, Ren wakes up in an elegant castle, in the arms of the gorgeous demon Horned Lowly. Earlier that day, he'd skipped lectures to watch adults plumbing each other, but slept off and found himself where he currently is. He spends some time admiring this criminally cute girl, but unfortunately, he can't understand her. This puts them both in a fix, and she suddenly draws his face close to hers. At that instant, they both hear a loud sound, and the girl leads him to a crystal ball, through which they can see what's going on. He finds that the hero and his party are invading the castle, but she sets a trap that makes them all disappear. This is when he figures out that she's a demon lord. Although she's gonna need a BBL to fit the profile. In any case, Ren is a die-hard lolicon like you, so he doesn't mind her at all. Later, the demon lord feeds him her fat, juicy steak, but he's too shy to eat it, so she bites on the meat and feeds it to him. Later, he settles for a relaxing bath, but she shows up with a sponge and her flat, plotless body, insisting on scrubbing him. Even worse, as he settles to sleep, she lies in the same bed with him, and there's no way in hell he won't want to defile her lowliness that evening, but he restrains himself. The next day, the lame hero, more like Zero, invades the castle again and causes the floor to divide. But the demon lord gets pissed and causes them to vanish with one stroke of her finger. She walks up to him and pulls his hand to reveal a slight cut. Then tends to the wound. He thanks her, and she almost murders him with cuteness, so he tells her his name and successfully gets her to pronounce it. But when it's her turn to say it, she mumbles Arabic. Anyway, the next morning, Ren figures out that her name is Mary, and is glad that she can at least pronounce his name. Unfortunately, that's the only word she ever says, and it makes him feel like her pet. After 3 days, Ren is already fed up with the food because he's been served meat for lunch, breakfast, and dinner, and that's a crime, even for a carnivore. He helps to clear up the dishes and makes his way to the kitchen to find other ingredients, but to his greatest shock, he finds this life-size teddy, who just collects the dishes and ignores his existence. Out of curiosity, he pokes around and finds that it's not a stuffed animal, but possibly a golem. He tries communicating with Teddy, but this ain't no TED Talk, so he figures out on his own that there are indeed other ingredients. Mary lifts up another piece of meat for him, but he's so done with it and demonstrates his curiosity about other ingredients. However, when Ren moves to chop up some veggies with a knife, Mary freaks out, displaces the knife, and stabs it against a wall. He later pacifies her, and she responds with a "felt cute, might stab you later" expression. Full of amazement, Ren watches as Ted chops up the veggies. Then he makes a meal for them, and has poor Mary act as his scapegoat. Surprisingly, she enjoys the meal and has seconds, so Ren is glad that he'll finally be served more versatile dishes. Unfortunately for him, he resumes his endless days of meat torture. The next day, Ren sees a cute witch on her Tesla Cyberbroom and wonders if she's one of Mary's guests or a member of the hero's party. Within the twinkle of an eye, the witch dives straight into him with her succulent milk reservoirs and gives him a death stare. From her cleavage, she draws out a wand and starts shooting magical attacks at Ren, who immediately runs for his life as he cries for help. In the process, he slips and falls, so she traps him, draws nearer to him with the death stare, and presses her soft, plushy badenders against his chest. At this moment, the witch gives him a mindgasm in, like, 20 seconds. Ren protests when she closes his eyes with her tiny fingers, but she knocks him on the head, tortures his fingers, and rips a handful of hair from his scalp. She draws a pentagram and uses a strand of his hair, which she curiously observes, to perform some weird ritual. Ren thinks it's all over for him because she's finally going to curse his sorry but she takes out the strand, and after watching it sparkle, she smiles for the first time. She happily walks towards him, drags him, and peeks into his pants to gauge the size of his katana. Ren has endured enough torture at this point, so he calls out to Mary, who instantly appears and hugs him, pulling him away from the witch. The two get into a staring competition, and Ren just knows that it's about to go down. Mary walks over to the witch and gets even with her by cutely punching her giant jugs, which makes Ren understand that they're indeed acquaintances. They begin communicating with each other in their own language, and the witch tells Mary to calm down because she's all grown up. Mary asks her what crazy thing she's done to Ren, but the witch reassures her that she only let the tip in. Later, Ren sees Ted walking towards him. but the golem is oblivious to his existence as usual and heads in the opposite direction to Mary. Just then, Mary and her witch friend divert their attention to him, and the witch mumbles some stuff he can't pick out over and over again. She gets pissed, and Mary draws her aside and whispers some stuff to her. Then she mutters the name Nee to him. She seems to be pissed at him, and he attempts to figure out what her deal with Mary is. Seeing that she's definitely not one of her generals, so he assumes that she's probably her elder sister, even though they're not related by blood. Suddenly, Mary has these puppy dog eyes and looks like she's about to cry, while the witch has a stern expression on her face. Eventually, Mary bursts out crying, but her witch friend seems to maintain her stern stance, and then both ladies start dragging Ren. Though he won't mind having a witch as his baby mama, he says he won't ever leave Mary's side. Suddenly, Ted runs by, and it starts raining. So Ren takes off his sweater and covers Mary as they head towards the castle while telling Nee to tag along. While he double checks to ensure that Mary isn't wet in the castle, the witch laughs at him, and he suspects that it could be because he took off his shirt and revealed his absent abs. However, she whispers to Mary, and Mary excitedly hugs Ren, which he interprets to mean that Nee has finally approved of his stay in the castle. Nee leaves with a creepy smile, and Mary suddenly feels like putting a dog collar around him. Even as a religious fan of 50 Shades, he just won't have any of it. So far, it's been a week since Ren was summoned, and he can't sleep beside Mary because she snores like a rusty, old truck engine. Besides, his pillow is uncomfortable, and he would rather sleep on Mary's natural pillows, though they're smaller than lemons. She cutely calls his name in her sleep, but he soon hears a loud sound and checks the crystal to confirm. Again, it's the hero's party, and this time around, they're doing their best to avoid the traps. Ren feels pressured to get rid of them and goes on to explore the castle later on with Mary, so he won't fall victim to her traps. He finds Ted in a room sewing a replica of the sweater he's wearing, so he thanks him and notices that there's so much cotton he could put to good use. He tries describing a pillow to Mary, but she just doesn't get it, so she just gives him a smile, urging him to do whatever the heck he wants. Ren finds some cotton, but it's just not hard enough to create a perfect pillow. Immediately, he spots Ted's tail, which looks like the perfect texture he's looking for. Ted has a scowl on his face and walks towards Ren like he's about to ice-sky him back to Earth, but he picks up a better bale of cotton with the perfect toughness Ren needs for a pillow. He proceeds to sew up the pillow, but Mary soon activates her Demon Lord state and becomes overprotective because he's holding a needle, so he hands it over to Ted and describes what he wants. Later, Ted finishes with it and makes a perfect pillow, so Ren presents one pillow to Mary. Finally, they can both enjoy some quality sleep. Meanwhile, far away from Mary's castle, the hero is approached by a priestess named Fina. She threatens to beat him to stupor because he isn't supposed to be wandering about during the blessing ceremony, as someone could find him out. The angry Fina also scolds the hero for letting their witch get lost in the crowd, and they set out to look for her. Just then, Mary and Ren come in. Dressed in mantles, he wonders why no one seems to recognize Mary by her horns, then concludes that there are different races of people in this world. Later, he sees a dragon appear and disappear, and he just becomes confused, trying to figure out whether the festival is to celebrate dragons. After, they come across some drakes, and Mary tugs at him to play some dumb ring game to win the drake for her. On his first try, he misses it, but gets it on the second attempt. Ren celebrates his win because he's taken too many L's in his lifetime, but he gets carried away in the process. And Mary wanders away. He embarks on a tiring journey to search for her, using some objects as landmarks to guide him. Soon, he gives up, sits, and waits for her, but a witch suddenly starts staring at him. She casually speaks Japanese to him like he'll understand anything, but as usual, the communication fails. Next, she casts a spell, and some cute stuff like confetti appears in the air, mesmerizing Ren. However, the girl's mood switches up real fast, and she touches his face. In the next second, she strips him and peeks at his sausage. Traumatized by the experience, Ren calls out for Mary, and she speedily locates him, hugging him when she finds him. Later, the witch reunites with the hero and priestess, and then she narrates her encounter with Ren, saying she felt a trace of magic that was similar to that of an acquaintance. Meanwhile, Ren is still rattled by his encounter with the witch and decides to stay the heck away from those edgy witches before they turn him into a vibrating plastic doll. The day finally comes to an end, and he acknowledges that he had fun, but just before sleeping, Mary insists that they have a triple sum with her new toy. Some days later, Ren feels bored and wishes he had his computer. And he also worries that his parents would find all the adult blockbusters that he oils his rod to. He peeks at what Mary is reading but can't understand a single letter there, though he uses his leftover IQ to decipher the plot of the story. When he sees a cake there, he becomes interested in it and begs Ted to make one for them. Mary later serves him some tea, and Ted brings the cake, which looks more like a brown pie than a cake. Mary seems overjoyed as she sees it, so Ren becomes curious about the taste of the pie. Ted slices it for them, but the aroma soon hits him, and he realizes that there's meat in that cake. Ren is shocked and disappointed because, even if he loves meat, he's been traumatized enough to become a vegetarian. However, he sees Mary's eyes brighten up with excitement, and she mentions some indecipherable thing to him. She also takes her slice of her meat and relishes the aroma, so he finally realizes that perhaps what joined them together was their love for thick, juicy meat. In the end, they enjoy so much of the meat that they can no longer eat dinner. The next day, Mary gets up before him and wakes him up, but he feels feverish and worries that he may have caught a cold when he was running from the witch. He figures that a bit of rest may cure him, but he's also quite concerned about infecting Mary, so he pushes her out. Mary's confused and can only call his name with a confused look, but he shuts the door in her face. He immediately feels like a douchebag and imagines that she might be crying, but he decides to rest either way. Mary, on the other hand, locks herself in her library and browses through some books to find a cure for Ren's cold, so she takes the recipe to the kitchen and fixes it herself. Moments later, Ren wakes up to a knock on the door and sees it opening with no one coming in, so he freaks out. To worsen the situation, he sees a bunch of creepy stuffed Annabelles suddenly appearing at the entrance of the door and almost passes out. But Mary eventually stops her freak show and calls out to him, then drops a trolley with his lunch set. He thanks her with a thumbs up, and she returns the gesture. When she leaves, Ren opens the meal and finds porridge with fresh ingredients in it. It tastes really good, and he figures that Mary must have gone through the trouble of making it herself, and she kept the stuffed animals there to keep him company. With this, Ren is determined to get better on time. He falls asleep, and Mary comes to wake him up after a while, but he still lays fast asleep, so she drops some dumb mumble rap bars for him while he sleeps. When he gets up, Ren feels much better and says something about how bad he feels for the stress he made Mary go through. Shockingly though, Ren finds himself back in his boring room, much to his disbelief. Ren wonders if he's just being delusional and still can't believe that he's back in his room, because everything happened suddenly. He quickly gets into his PC and destroys his hard disk so his parents don't find out that he's oiling his sausage to Lolita PG videos. Next, he does a hard factory reset on his phone, but later doubts his actions because he's not sure that he can return to Mary's crib, and deleting his data would have been a stupid move. He decides to catch up on some anime and starts thinking about Mary, thinking it would be a great idea if she could live in his own world with him. Still confused, he wonders how he returned to this world, and if Mary had forcefully created a path to kick him out. On the other hand, something might have happened to Mary, and maybe she got ill and died. Sinking in his worries, Ren becomes desperate to return to Mary's side, but doesn't know how to. Knowing that it was Mary's spell that got him to the castle, and he can't replicate it, he resorts to screaming Mary's name like an idiot. Nothing happens, as expected, so he resumes his brain-rot life and starts drooling on his pillow. He thinks about Mary and wonders just how lonely she might be in that castle, but he suddenly hears Mary's lullaby. And she appears right in front of him. She tries to communicate something by pressing her forehead against his, and he gets that she's reminding him about his fever. Ren is glad to return to Mary's world, but soon realizes that his reappearance in his room was all a dream. If indeed it was, then all his creepy videos are still on his system, together with the note he left behind, saying he was living the life, like Andrew Tate. Mary brings out another potion, and even though Ren feels better, he's trying to avoid her tantrums, so he drinks it. It is safe to say that he was better off not drinking it. The next day, Ren is still unsure if the visit to his room was all just a dream or not, and this kept him up all night because he was scared of falling asleep again. He's glad to enjoy another peaceful meal with Mary, but the enemy of his happiness gets him again, and Nee appears. He's shocked to see her, and she worsens his fears with some bombastic side eyes she keeps giving. He sees Mary shake her head and say something, while the witch nods in utter disappointment and taps him. At the table, Ren is confused about what just happened, but he sees that they're having fun. At this point, he knows that even if they all spoke the same language, he'd barely be a part of their seemingly enjoyable conversation because they're obviously talking about him. Nee isn't even hiding it because she's pointing to him. So he accepts that grills are witches both on Earth and in Mary's world. While they eat, Mary finds that the tea jug is empty, and Ren wants to help, but she leaves him behind with that cold-hearted witch. They stare awkwardly at each other until the witch calls his name. Then she takes out a blank sheet of paper and draws something on it. Now she's no Picasso, but the diagram is still better than modern-day art. Ren interprets the drawing to mean that something has flown out of him. And there's something in the middle looking like seaweed with a cross on it, while he's holding something that looks like an apple. Afterwards, she gives him a beautiful gem he assumes to be a magical accessory, and then she taps on his portrait and points to the gem. This makes him realize that the apple thingy she drew was actually a gem. She motions for him to put it around his neck, and later that night, Ren still tries to make sense of the whole thing, but her terrible drawing keeps him from falling asleep. For a few days now, Mary has been up to some creepy shit, and Ren hasn't been oblivious. He's noticed her sneaking out at night to a secret place, but he's majorly concerned that her chest wagons won't grow at all if she's lacking good sleep. He soon becomes curious and contemplates following her to expose her secret, but he just can't get himself to do it. Later, though Mary can barely eat without feeling drowsy, so Ren decides to follow her and convinces himself that he's just doing it for her well-being. She goes through a door, and he decides not to open the door because he doesn't want to startle her. Then he finds some prickly pieces of metal in his pocket. However, just then, he hears a loud sound from within the room and panics, so he opens the door. Ren finds Mary sitting on the floor with a bunch of jars and a slime on the floor, which swallows up the piece of metal that fell from his pocket. He becomes curious about the animal and understands that she's been sneaking off to give this slimy guy some of her juicy slime. She puts some food for the slime in a bowl, and they watch it eat, after which it slips away through the crack in the walls. As they head back to the room, Ren presumes that the animal must be nocturnal since Mary doesn't have to cater for it during the day, so he says he'll be following her to feed it at night. Later that night, they go on to feed the slime and play with it, though it obviously hates that he'll have to share Mary with Ren. Sometime later, though, the slime grows wings, and Ren is shocked, and it gets even worse when it grows legs. Slimy looks at the night sky so longingly, and Mary hugs it goodbye, while Ren wishes it goodbye as it flies out to look for a family. Slimy flies away, but Mary isn't herself the next day. Surprisingly, it later returns, much to Ren's disappointment. As he sees Mary light up when the slime returns, he realizes that he's found a rival. After living with Mary for a while, Ren sees her true colors when he sees her sleeping in zombie mode. On this particular night, there's no space on the bed to accommodate him, so he considers adjusting her posture. However, he doesn't want to get tempted by the wonderland between her legs, so he decided to take a walk and wait it out. On the other side, the hero party is trying to invade again, and the witch makes a suggestion on how to do it differently. After exploring the current floor, they're all hungry and exhausted because the castle is really large. Despite their efforts, there are traps on every floor and still no signs of any demons, so they are asking who built the castle in the first place. Just then, the witch falls into a trap and lands right in front of a surprised Ren, who was only getting a midnight snack. They're both shocked to see each other, and Ren recognizes her as the witch that approached him during the town festival. When the witch perceives the aroma of Ren's food, she stares at him with the cutest eyes, and he shares some of it with her. While they're enjoying their meal, Ted walks in on them, and it suddenly clicks to Ren that the only visitors that ever make it to the castle are the hero's party. He stares at her with a look of realization, and she gets it too. Ren knows he's also in trouble for feeding the enemy's party, even though the situation might be awkward for her as well. She suddenly starts fidgeting and trying to bail her way out of the situation, saying a bunch of incoherent stuff. Ren really isn't sure what to do because he can't just let her slip away since she's their enemy, and launching an attack on her could be the end of his life, given that she's a witch. Just then, Mary comes out looking for Ren, but when she sees the awkward situation in front of her, she gets angry, and her expression tells these two that they're goners. Mary's death stare is even worse than the one she had when the hero's party invaded, and this time, it's directed at Ren, who's terrified to the core. Ted suddenly drags him away and wonders if they're about to fight right there and then. The terrified witch starts explaining a bunch of stuff and mentions Nee's name somewhere in the conversation. So Ren tries to connect the dots, trying to figure out whether she's Nee's acquaintance or if Nee is somehow affiliated with the hero's party. In no time, the atmosphere between the ladies becomes more friendly, and it seems perhaps that they've found a better way to communicate with each other. Also, Ren recalls that the witch had been really nice to him at the festival, so she's probably a good person. Ren is glad that Mary's in a better mood, so he calls her name, but she switches to one of her schizo personalities and responds with a pout. The witch, being confused, tries to pacify the situation and confirms Ren's name, after which she says that her name is Seal. They delightfully shake hands, but Mary's evil eye is obvious, and Ren can tell that she isn't too happy with his Casanova ways. Just then, Ted brings a buffet of all sorts of sweets, and Ren just knows that they're about to party till dawn. The ladies look delighted to see desserts, so Ren hopes that Mary can at least get a sugar rush and be more smiley towards him. Meanwhile, the hero's party finally realizes that Seal is missing, but the hero just assumes that she teleported home because she was hungry. However, they're used to seeing her go missing like she did on the day of the festival, so they just plan to wait outside the castle for her. Back in the castle, Ren feels really full after their mini party, and when he sees Seal getting ready to leave, he believes that she's worried about the hero. Surprisingly, she hugs Mary so warmly as she turns to leave, and Ren can't wait to meet her again because of how nice she is. Later, Seal meets up with the hero and Fina, who notice that she's had her fill and ask her about it. The master capper says that she fell into a trap, found herself in the middle of a food storage, and helped herself. The hero says she's quite lucky, then shares some cookies with him, but this seems to anger Fina. She yells out like a cursed 50-year-old virgin, saying that it's dangerous for a hero to eat the devil's cookie. Under her command, they return to town, and she says she's glad that Seal isn't hurt. But when she turns her back, the hero silently eats Mary's cookies. As for Ren, he's in deep because Mary won't even look at him, and much later, she resumes sleeping like a zombie. The next day, Ren is still tormented by the fact that Mary wasn't in his mood the previous day, and even though she slept next to him, he's determined to find out what got her so pissed. At breakfast, he tries to greet her as he usually does, but messes up and makes the situation awkward, getting Mary a bit confused. After trying to figure out his mood, they both resume their awkward stares at each other until Ted serves their breakfast. Yet, even after eating, the awkwardness persists and is killing Ren so much that he wishes they even fought, because then he'll have a reason to apologize and fix things. Even worse, Mary seems unable to focus on anything but her awkward situation with the idiot. Mercifully, though, as Ren is hoping for someone to save him from this deadly silence, Slimy shows up, and they immediately stuff him with food. Ren is glad to see that Slimy's quite the wrecking ball and would have to stall with them to return to normal. But to his greatest surprise, Slimy does him dirty and leaves, even after pleading with the dude to remedy their weird situation. Unfortunately, everything returns to default, so Ren asks Mary if she's hungry, and without waiting for an answer, turns to ask Ted for lunch. However, Mary calls him, and as he turns, she trips over an object on the ground, landing in his arms afterwards. In the process, she bumps her forehead against his chin and starts laughing through the pain, and even though Ren is quite confused, he joins her to laugh. Much later, he's relieved to see that the atmosphere between them is back to normal, and he can calmly sleep without fearing that Mary will chop off his wand. Ever since Ren got ice skate into this world, he's only seen Mary laugh when they bumped against each other the previous day, so he's committed to making her smile more often. The problem is that the language barrier makes it difficult for him to torment her with his dead dad jokes, so he chooses to make a funny face, more like a mimicry of Chuck. Apparently, this was so funny to his league of soy boys at school, but Mary is no soy boy, so she's pretty disgusted and disturbed for his life. Judging from her expression, Ren can tell that he sucks at being Dave Chappelle and has made her worry instead. So he assures her that he's okay. At lunch, he re-strategizes and plans to give her a jump scare, hoping to make her laugh. Unfortunately, this flunks again because she instantly attacks him with a spell, thinking he's a threat. Later, Ren sulks after seeing that neither of his plans worked and instead backfired. He asks Ted to share some ideas on how to make Mary laugh, but Ted doesn't speak stupid, so he ignores him. However, Ren suddenly gets an idea and creates the most messed up flower vase, plus he isn't even sure whether they're poisonous plants or not. Later, Mary comes across the flowers and stares at Ren like what the heck, but he turns away. And she smiles. While soaking in the bath, Ren feels embarrassed as heck because he's not sure that she knows who placed the flowers. But then he observes that his goal has shifted from making Mary laugh to knowing that she is really happy. Just then, Mary emerges from the bath and startles him. She seems quite happy that her plan has worked, but Ren is mad that she spent all the time in the water and didn't choke on his lollipop. As he retires to bed, Ren can't believe she smiled eventually, but he wonders if she really pranked him to revenge for the other pranks he played on her. The next day, they both head to town, and Ren recalls the trauma he endured during the previous visit, so he plans not to get lost this time around. They arrive at the store, and he sees a bunch of weird things in jars, so he gets curious and touches one of them. Immediately he gets spanked and scolded by Mary, so he apologizes and minds his business. Later, a furry shows up with a large pot and greets him, but when he sees her chained up at her ankles and her neck, he wonders if she's a slave or if she's in Zaddy's chokehold. In the event that she's a slave, Ren is quite confused that there's also slavery in this part of the world, because everything seems cute. The furry starts talking with him, but he tries to let her know that he doesn't understand. But to his greatest shock, she welcomes him to the store in his own language and asks him if he needs anything. He says no, and she tells him to enjoy his stay. But it just clicks to Ren that this furry just spoke his own language to him, and he double checks by asking her if she understands what he's saying. For some reason, she thinks he's trying to get into her pants, so she tells him to back off. But he's just too excited to have someone understand him, and he also asks her if she was taught the language. Obviously, she's not into him, so she tags him as a Casanova and tells him to leave her alone. Ren remains persistent and narrates his communication gap with Mary, but the furry still isn't interested in his sorry love story, so she tells him to go shove his middle finger in his He quickly offers to help her with chores, and she seems surprised at his offer, so she eventually lets him have his way. She introduces herself as Vedika, and when he sees how she reacts to being called Vedika-chan, he gets that she's only adept at basic Japanese. When Ren asks her who taught her the language, she says it was her grandmother. This heightens his curiosity, so he asks her a bunch of questions pertaining to her grandma, as well as if there are others like him who have been summoned to this world. She tells him to shut his lousy, stinking mouth, and he just assumes that she doesn't know what she's saying is rude. Ren says he'll like to meet with her grandma, but she says it's impossible because grandma passed away when she was a kid. They arrive at the entrance of a cave, and she says that they're supposed to harvest the herbs at that point. Ren is creeped out because it resembles a typical monster cave, but Vedika quickly reassures him to go in and give his best. This gets him to become really suspicious and worried about the fact that he could get into deep trouble and no one would know since he didn't alert Mary before leaving. His trust issues also kick in concerning Vedika, despite the fact that they speak the same language. Just then, she asks him what his life is currently like, and he talks about Mary and how juicy her naughty pit is. Obviously, this makes Vedika somewhat jealous, so she changes the topic and starts gathering herbs that she'll return home with. However, Ren realizes that he hasn't asked her anything about this world, and he's not even sure what question to ask. In the first place, she isn't fluent in Japanese, and she also may not know much about summoning. Anyways, Ren isn't only interested in knowing about summoning, but he genuinely wants a means through which he can thank Mary for being so kind to him and giving him unlimited ecstasy. Vedika sees him looking worried and asks if everything is okay. But just then, a sharp piece of rock breaks off from the cave and almost lands on her head. Ren tries to stop her, but she dodges it before he gets there, causing him to land on the ground. She says that she's developed quick reflexes because she's used to it. She apologizes for getting him injured and asks to hold his hand, then starts singing a song that he recognizes to be the same one that Mary sang for him when he was sick. Observing the concerned look on his face, she tells him that she can only use basic healing spells, but right then, his pendant starts glowing, and a bright light shines behind him and Vedika. He suddenly finds himself in the castle with Mary and me, standing in a magical circle, and realizes that the pendant is a lost child pendant. Judging from Mary's expression, he knows that she could get angry as she did when he was with Seal, so he starts acting like an ugly coward. However, Vedika steps in to handle the situation and whispers some stuff to her, but seeing Mary's countenance, it seems that she has only worsened matters. As a child, Vedika heard so many stories from her grandmother, ranging from one about a witch, another about a great war between demons, humans, and elves, and then one about a love story between a human and a demon. These stories made Vedika so curious about the world that she ventured out of her village, learning a lot of lessons. One of which is never to pick on people who are stronger than herself, like me and Mary. Ren jolts her back to reality and asks her what the heck she said to Mary, but she lies and says she's good. Mary is red as a cherry, so Ren bugs her to spill the tea, and she confesses that she told Mary some embarrassing stories. When she sees that Ren is losing his mind, she starts panicking and begs him not to hurt her. She then asks him why he isn't also scared, and he tells her that he was summoned by Mary. Hearing this, Vedika assumes that Ren has lost his mind because the summoning spell got lost about a millennium ago, after the demon war, until a goddess came to their rescue. Ni interrupts them when she taps Vedika, and Ren begs her to be easy on the girl. But Vedika tells him not to be worried about her because Ni is only asking for a favor. Ren is filled with worry for Vedika and apologizes to Mary for all the confusion he caused by leaving her at the store. To his greatest shock, Mary utters a big, fat thank you, and he's so thrilled that he asks her where she learned it from. To his disappointment, she resumes her indecipherable language, making him understand that she had to learn the words, even though she probably doesn't know what they mean. Finally, he seizes the opportunity to thank her for taking good care of him and his sausage. But Vedika barges in and tells them that she is now their interpreter, following Ni's request. Ren is taken by surprise and can't really tell if this is a good idea because she doesn't really have a grasp on the language. He tells her to do her best in interpreting for them, but deep down, he knows this girl's mouth is going to land them in trouble. First, he tells her to ask them why he was summoned, and she returns an annoying expression, saying that Ni assures him that he'll be fine. Apparently she asked Ni about his cultured mind instead, and this messes so much with Ren's mood because she's just complicating matters for him. However, he wonders if this whole summoning incident is being kept a secret, seeing that Vedika keeps referring to him as a wacko when he brings it up. Next, he asks her the name of their world, and the dumb fool tells him her own name. Ren is finally relieved to find a worthy competitor in Daphnis, so he just asks her more basic questions like her age and stuff. The stupid girl suddenly runs to Ni, who threatens him with her wand, before Vedika reveals that she's a 50-year-old cougar. She drags him to a corner and tortures him with language tutorials, but he gives up because he's the Einstein of stupidity. Ren tearfully begs her on his knees to give his Willy a blow, but just then, Mary walks in. She brings them a tray of desserts, and while Ren enjoys his tea, he wonders what they're talking about. This fuels his determination to actually learn their language, and he thanks Mary, but she answers with the same word. However, he tells her to acknowledge his gratitude with a welcome note this time around, and she gets it right. Suddenly, Vedika lights up with excitement and decides that she'll teach Mary instead, and waste no time trying to force Ren to identify as a logical human when he's just as dumb as you are. The next day, the hero's party arrives at the store that Mary and Ren had previously visited, asking for Vedika. The store owner tells them that Vedika now has a new boss, but they scold her for letting her go even though she's been really helpful to the owner. She explains that a monstrous witch visited the store and paid her in bitcoins in exchange for Vedika, with a few threats here and there. They ask the owner why Vedika was carried away, and she says it's because of some strange language the girl supposedly knows how to speak. Seal internally tries to make sense of everything, and probably has her suspicions, while the others also find it weird that she's working as an interpreter instead of a maid. This leads them to all become worried about her, mostly because they don't know her new owners. Meanwhile, at the castle, Mary meets Ren and manages to blurt out good morning, so he almost dies from her cuteness. He tells her well done for a perfect job and also thanks her for the food. When he sees her curiously staring at him to repeat the words he's saying, he pronounces it slowly, and she gets it in one try, making the doofus jealous. While he does the dishes with Ted, Ren is super proud of his lowly's efforts to learn Japanese, and this makes him feel worthy for the first time in his life. However, it's all been Vedika's doing. She's given her a written memo, but Ren doesn't trust the furry and her naughty mind. Since he can't really see or hear anything, Ren gets worked up, and Vedika notices his obvious discomfort, so she points it out. She gives him a present from Ni and calls it underwear instead of a souvenir, but before he can correct her, Mary repeats the word underwear, making that her first bad word. He opens the souvenir and finds that it's a delicious pie, then Mary repeats the word delicious. Vedika watches them with a bitter expression on her face, so Mary invites her to dine with them before she dies of jealousy. Mary seems to be getting better with her pronunciation, but Ren meets Vedika and tells her to start teaching Mary some basic Japanese words first, instead of giving her complex stuff. However, she tells him to shut up with a loudspeaker he calls a mouth because Mary has had enough of his loud voice. Dude starts panicking and considers getting rid of his rotten vocal cords, But before she leaves, Vedika tells him she was just messing with him. Some days later, Ren notices that Vedika hasn't paid a visit to the castle as she usually used to, and he's quite disturbed because he has a few things to ask her. He quickly runs to Mary and asks her what she's doing with a scroll almost twice her height. She spreads it out, and he sees a real magic circle inscribed on it. So he wonders if she's going to summon Vedika with it, though he's not sure about the ethical issues around that. Suddenly, he sees a bright light and finds that they've been teleported to a round door leading to a cottage. They get there and knock on the door, and he expects to see Ni but finds Vedika instead, dressed in an elegant maid costume. Ren remarks on how cute she looks in the dress, but she just bangs the door in his face. When she opens it, she says that Ni isn't at home and tells him about how much she hates her clothes because Ni forced her to wear them. Ren goes on yapping about how much he loves the cosplay and how he can't wait to lift that skirt and pump the rice cakes from behind. Finding his guts to be unbelievable, Vedika uses her tail to reset his face so hard that he takes a while to sit and think about his life choices. Later, he remarks on the fact that Ni's place is so messy, and Vedika says she's fed up because she's been cleaning it daily. But Ni has an OCD for living like a pig. They move on to talk about Mary's cute look, and he tells her it was inspired by Seal's hairstyle, which Mary had asked him to help out with. Realizing that Mary understands his words, he stops yapping and shuts up. Vedika asks what they need from Ni, but Ren explains that they actually came looking for her because he wants to ask her about the healing song she sang for him and where she learned it from. Initially, she thinks he finds her singing to be horrible like Ozzy's, but he's just interested in knowing where she learned the lyrics from. She says it's a popular hit and makes him think that an old granny is trying to teach them Japanese through music, but she just kills the vibe when she confesses that she created the lyrics herself. Ren is just horrified because now he knows that it was just a parody she'd been singing. However, both ladies start singing the song, and he remembers it as the same song from the dream. Vedika invites him to join them, but he's just fixated on the fact that he can't recall where he first heard the mysterious song. When they're about to leave, though, Vedika forces them to help her do her chores. In the morning, Mary wakes up sweaty, confused, and exhausted after Ren stuffed his beef in her tight taco all night. Meanwhile, the hero visits Fina at church because she needs him to answer a few questions. He's quite curious, though, given that she insists on keeping Seal in the dark, so he asks if perhaps the question has something to do with her birthday. Fina says it's not, then asks him if he remembers their first encounter with her. On that day, she was being chased by a dragon and screaming for help, so they bailed her out. She thanked them and apologized for the stress, explaining that she was there because she had just completed her witch training and was exploring a bit when she stepped into a dragon's lair. They told her to beware of dragons because they were currently on a mission to get rid of them, and then she offered to follow them and use her skills to help them. Ever since that day, Seal has been following them, and Fina says she thinks that the girl is hiding something because she's never used magic, and they're not even sure she told them her real name or hometown. Actually, they don't really know much about Seal, even though she's now a member of their party. In this regard, Fina asks him to join her as she investigates Seal, who will be visiting her master. Even though she's a demoness, Fina won't care, but she still has to investigate her since she's a member of their party, because there's a possibility that Seal could be a demon supporting Mary. Meanwhile, Seal finds Vedika and is delighted to see her, so she forcefully hugs her. Vedika struggles to recognize who she is until Seal reminds her that she's a member of the hero's party. She wonders why Seal is there anyway, and she says that Ni is her master. At the demon castle, Mary and Ren finish eating, so he tells her to go take a bath, demonstrating what the word means. She happily skips away, saying the word, but she accidentally stumbles and falls to the floor. At that instant, Ren realizes that she didn't finish her food, which is unusual, even for Mary. After a while, Ren notices that Mary hasn't returned from the bath, and his corrupt mind thinks she's been greasing her lacuna, so after Ted serves some cookies, he goes to the bath to call her out for cookies. He hears no sound coming from the bathroom and assumes that she's done, then goes to look for her at the library. Upon arriving, he discovers her feeble state as she sits on the floor and determines if she is dozing off. She opens her eyes, and Ren lets her know that Ted prepared cookies for them. Then he feels her up a little. As he leaves, Mary's hands slip out of his, and she slumps to the floor. After a while, Mary's lying ill in bed, so he thanks Ni for assisting him because he was really nervous and didn't know how to be of any help to her. Ni pats him on the head, while Vedika assures him that she'll be okay. then starts muttering something about her magic. She stutters and just closes off by saying that Mary isn't sick and she'll eventually pull through. Watching Mary in a titiful state, Ren feels bad for neglecting her because she would have fared better if he had acted sooner. Suddenly, Ni gets up to prepare something for Mary since Vedika's healing spells didn't work. Feeling bad, Vedika apologizes for being useless. But Ren wonders why she's apologizing because he's even more useless to Mary's condition than she is. Just then, Ni returns and signals them to bring Mary. But Ren sees the same magical circle through which he was summoned and asks what Ni's about to do. Vedika says they're trying to wake her up but suddenly tells him to go. But he's not clear on the instructions and steps into the magical circle. Suddenly, he sees a bright light and finds himself surrounded by so many doors, making him wonder if he's in a castle. Suddenly, he sees an elf dude saying it's quite surprising that the ladies trust Ren so much, and he asks him if he's looking for Mary. Ren is confused by the questions and surprised by the fact that the stranger can speak Japanese, so he asks who he is. The guy introduces himself as Lolo, a magician residing in that world. Ren asks Lolo why and how he can speak Japanese, but Lolo thinks his priorities are misplaced and asks him if Mary isn't more important than the question he asked. Lolo refers to him by his name, and Ren is quite shocked because he didn't tell the dude his name. However, Lolo gladly brags that he knows everything about Ren, unlike the person behind him. Just then, he turns to find that Vedika has followed him. Lolo tells him that she's a lichen, which is a species of beastmen known to have super hearing abilities and longevity, though they're extremely sensitive to magic. Vedika asks him if he knows her, and he says he only knows a few of her people. To answer Ren's question, Lolo explains that they're not physically in that space, as it is only a figment of their imagination. Hence, it explains why they're not exactly communicating by speaking, but by conveying their thoughts to each other. Ren seems to understand it immediately. But Vedika's lost, only until Lolo calls her a cutie, after which she starts blushing. Lolo keeps fawning over her and fetishizing her long tail sticking in the crack of his unfortunate buns. Back to the main subject of concern, he narrates Mary's story to them. It all started when Mary's grandparents met. Her grandfather was a demon king, and her grandmother was a witch. They gave birth to her mother, who got married to a human, and they had Mary afterwards. Unfortunately, the demon king was killed by the heroes, so Mary's mother used everything within her power to protect Mary. He shows them the door and tells them that they're the source of magic to that world. And Mary's heart is connected to all the doors, so if anything happens to her, the door will vanish and release a great amount of power into the world and cause it to break down. To prevent this from happening, a demon king is needed so that he can control all the magic in the world, even though the previous demon king intentionally released some magic into the world to cause an apocalypse. Lolo asks him if he isn't scared of Mary at this point, but Ren says he isn't, because he doesn't believe that Mary will do such a thing. Ren sighs because he didn't expect Mary's role to be that crazy, and he also figures out that she fainted because she lost control of the doors, and the magical pressure behind the doors is putting pressure on her. Ren wonders how it happens, and Lolo blames it on puberty and starts acting like a frickin' grandpa. However, Ren tells him to stop acting like he isn't their age-mate, but Lolo says he's just backed up by great Asian genes, even though he's pretty old. After tormenting Ren and Vedika with his death hug, he apologizes, saying he's just glad to finally have some fun after this while. He shows them a door behind which they can find Mary, but they're scared as heck. However, on the way, Ren picks up a striking resemblance between Mary and Lolo, so he asks him how he's related to Mary. Dude says he's the source of all evil, so the devil should just freaking retire, and that he was overconfident in his magical skills. As they give him a pitiful stare, he tells them not to be worried about him. Then he asks them to tell Ni-senpai that he's doing just fine. Afterwards, Ren pushes the door. When they get in, the room has more windows instead of doors, with a similar level of magic as the previous one. As they walk, Vedika asks Ren what senpai means, and it occurs to Ren that he didn't ask how Lolo and Ni are related. He, however, notices that Vedika looks so pale, and she explains that the magical flow in the room is too dense for her, and she feels like she's walking through a swamp. Ren decides that they should sit and rest for a while since they've yet to find anything, but Vedika tells him to leave her behind and go search for Mary. Ren insists on waiting and tells her that Mary must be doing fine, so he tells her to rest on his laps and choke on his katana. She does and tells him she needs more of his meat because she's not satisfied. Soon after, she falls asleep, wakes up quite hyperactive, and says that they should set out. To their biggest shock, a smaller version of Mary appears and asks them where they are coming from, and even though her size is shocking, Ren is very shocked that she's speaking in his tongue. He understands that this could be what Lolo meant by saying that they are currently in a typical fantasy world. Just to confirm, he asks Mary if she can understand what he's saying, and she proves it. So he says something about how cool she is, even though she's quite small. She refuses to be called small and says that her dad said she became bigger, then asks if they're friends of her dad. He finds her to be extremely cute and asks if he can hug her, so she happily walks into his arms and makes him look like a PD file. Seizing the opportunity since they now understand each other, Ren asks little Mary what her hobbies are, and she says she loves reading Aardvark stories, which are mostly about how a princess defeated the Lord of Hell. She tells him that he smells like someone named Maria, who named her Mary. Ren asks him if he knows Maria, and he says he's Ni's acquaintance. She calls Ni a mischievous witch who height shames her. They start playing, and she says Ren's face is as soft as her buns. Her cuteness makes him eager to give her his heart on the spot. However, she suddenly turns sad and narrates that everyone she used to play with suddenly disappeared, so she was scared that no one could meet her there anymore. Unfortunately, Maria, her friends, and Mary's father all passed away. Ren asked her why everyone died, and she says that humans are fragile beings and are unable to live beyond a century. Even though her father is an elf, he can't stay with her forever because eventually he'll get old and die. Vedika explains that elves live for about 500 years, while lycans live for 300, but Mary is so powerful that she could live for centuries to a millennia, outliving everyone else. Ren apologizes and says he wishes he had come earlier, but he tells her that she will no longer be alone because he'll be with her to the very end and Ni will continue with her occasional visits. Yet Mary isn't satisfied because Ren will still die at the end, and even though she's endured so far, she hates the fact that she can no longer see those that she loves. Eventually, she says that even if she's just meeting him, it'll be better if she hadn't because he's just going to disappear anyway. But Ren has some stupid confidence that he's the anime version of Deadpool, even though there's absolutely no proof. He tells her to be positive because her days will brighten up someday, and she'll be happy almost every day. Anyway, Ren says it's time for Mary to wake up, so she asks him if he's lying, but he says he's not, so she holds his face and says that he looks and sounds like Maria, even though he's the uglier version of her. She asks him about his name, but tells him to leave it until they meet again. All this while, Vedika is slowly joining her ancestors because a strong magical current is draining her of life. But she later gets up because the conversation between Ren and Mary has absorbed most of the magic. Before they leave, Mary calls Ren back and kisses him on his forehead, because it's a special gift she only shares with her mom and dad. Before they know it, the door shuts them out, and Mary says goodbye. Small Mary wakes up on her bed and hears someone calling her out to play, but she thinks it's Maria and heads out to meet her. However, she stops beside the magic circle and says she'll wait until she becomes more mature. When Ren returns, he calls out to Mary, and as soon as she sees him, she runs to hug him tightly and asks if he's okay, and he says he certainly is, though his heart feels like it's going to explode. Vedika feels bitter and left out, so she crashes their hug, and Mary expresses how worried she was for the both of them. Ren sees Ni and wonders if he should drop Lolo's message by himself, but he gets the balls to do it and tells her that Lolo is doing fine. She looks so shocked, and she stands for a while, absorbing it all. Later, they enjoy some pie and head to bed with really full stomachs. Then Mary thanks Ren for everything. The next day, Mary takes Ren out shopping and changes his wardrobe because she's tired of seeing him look like a homeless, wasted fool. Next, she takes him to a cafe, and they have tea and some thick, juicy slices of meat till they're extremely full. Next, she takes him to a church and shows him the statue of a woman she refers to as her mama, who was her hero. He thanks her out loud, but Mary tells him to lower his voice. On closer observation, Ren notices that the statue is dressed in a school uniform, which he feels he's seen somewhere before. This makes him realize that the hero was also summoned from Earth. Suddenly, they hear some loud noises, and Mary tells Ren to follow her. The two stand to watch the beautiful fireworks display, and Ren feels like this experience could be considered a date. As he stares at her, she does the same, and it becomes so awkward for the both of them. Ren then says that they should leave but return someday. Later that night, Ren dreams about Maria in a school uniform, referring to his mother as her auntie, and taking care of him while he's sick. Apparently Ren used to have an imaginary friend as a kid whom he used to call Maria, but one day she disappeared, and he almost forgot about her up until he saw the statue of Maria in a church. He thinks it's just a coincidence that Maria shares the same name as the hero, and just then, Mary wakes up. He resumes his analysis and figures that Maria and his elder brother look around the same age, meaning she must have been a high school student when she disappeared. He decides to ask Mary or Vedika, but it'll be more complicated to ask Vedika with her broken Japanese. While he helps Ted with the dishes, Mary peeks in and mentions something about a private business and together, so he figures that she might be asking him out on a date. Then he sets out to prepare. Maria asks him to wear the clothes she got for him, and she seems stunned by how good he looks, so they head out. They arrive at a giant door in the castle, and Mary takes him to a beautiful flower garden with a gravestone. Then she bends and knocks on it. Instantly, the atmosphere transforms into one similar to where he met Lolo. Someone stretches out, and he sees a woman on the seat, asking him to introduce himself. Immediately, he thinks that this should be Maria. Maria introduces herself as the hero who defeated the Demon King, and Mary runs to hug her but passes right through her and slips to the floor. Her warning comes late, cautioning Mary not to come running to her because it's only a remnant of her soul and she can't even see what they're doing. Mary feels offended and pouty, so Maria says she's missed her because it's been 100 years since they last met. On a closer look, Maria looks quite young, and she attributes this to the effect of the summoning magic, which unfortunately couldn't give her a life as long as Mary's. However, she says that the meeting isn't supposed to happen unless May has found someone she loves. At the same time, they're both shocked and shy, while Ren pretends to be dumb. Maria narrates that she was pretty shocked when she found Mary as a baby, who possessed the same power as the Demon King she had just defeated. This led her to inform her party about it, and they agreed to lock her up in a demon castle to keep her safe, but she'd eventually be lonely. Besides, the world was still terrified of the Demon King, so no one was allowed to meet her. To this, Mary agreed to do her job as the Demon King and told Maria not to worry about her. Maria says she was simultaneously taking care of her cousin in the real world, and at this point, Ren feels like he's found the answer he was looking for. She continues, saying that she thought of a replacement to take their place when they were gone. So she remembered Mary's dreams in which she was always playing with a child she didn't know. Even though she didn't know his name, she knew he was a black-haired boy who was fun to play with and usually sang her a Japanese song, which was Maria's usual lullaby for her. This was when Mary learned that Maria was somehow connected to the world she dreamt about. Maria then figured that since she was connected to Earth, maybe she could summon someone else just for Mary. Which is why she left that world and Ren got summoned. Mary then switches up and expresses how much she loves Maria, saying that Ren should help take good care of her. She reaches out her hand to Ren's and instantly knows, by the shape of his soul, that he is right for Mary. In reality, when Maria was on her deathbed, surrounded by her loved ones and descendants, she consoled them as she drew in her last breath, asking them to take care of Mary. Afterwards, Maria disappears and leaves Ren in a state of disarray, so he tells Mary to give him some time to properly confess his feelings for her. At dinner, he feeds her his milky fluid, but she hates him so much for this because she told him she doesn't swallow. He remembers that Marie mentioned something about using people as her pillow, so he motions for her to come sleep in his belly flap. But she says it's stinky and gets upset. Ren explains that after the meeting with Maria, he feels like he got to know her better, and even though she's not the way she used to be when she was with Maria, he feels like her old habits will still suit her character and is willing to accept her that way. He still wants to cuddle her, but after giving it some thought, they both agree to sleep in their usual manner. In the morning, Ren gets up before Mary, but she tugs at him. They head to a balcony, and Ren tells Mary that he can't speak her language, so he can't accurately convey the words to express his feelings. Regardless of this, he tells her that he wants to stay by her side forever. Immediately, Mary hugs him, and he asks her if she understood what he said, but she says it's a secret, with an innocent smile on her face. Will Ren actually live as long as Mary? If you'd like to find out in part 2, comment, "My shaft beats for lolis." Leave a thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe to the channel for similar content. As always, thanks for watching.